Hello, good evening, good day, everybody, and welcome to episode 265 of Ask Abhijit. Hope everybody is doing great. Today, once again, we don't have super chats. I'm going to take everybody's questions, as many as I can. It's going to be a 1 hour session because I had a long episode of geostrategy that just concluded. So let us see who all is there on the live chat. I'll do a 1 hour session. I'll take as many questions as I can. I can see Daksh, Ayush Yadav, anonymous scientist, bonjour, bonsoir, Animish, Hitanshu Mehta, Devik Shriyan, Rashmi Rathor from Rajasthan, hello, Sujit Shanagonda, Pratham Sharma, Aryan Rocking Gaming, good evening, Meet Mistri, Bharat First, Animish, namaste, Baba Bugatti, namaskaram, Hunter Kenway, good evening. Mahi Shrestha, Truthful Penguin, Manisha Cardozo, Anup Tekade, Pranay Paul from Kolkata, Dev Maulana Abhijit Chavda, well, from Kalinga. Good to see you, sir. Jimmy, Vande Mataram. Samath Tripathi, No Name, Sergeant Skylan, Animish again, Aditya Garg, Atman Moksha, Sujit Shanagunda again, Shri Ramachandraya Namaha, Sam the Gamer, Anant Chandak, Jimmy, Karan, who else do we have? Hunter Kenway, Shah Raj from London, England, Mullerine, Sunny Pal, SKK, Onkar Kulkarni, Utsav Khatri, Krishna Raghunath from the Surinamese, Netherlands, Anant again, Shadow Gamer, Samarth, No Name, Lathangi Suresh, Rahul Jangra, Anudipta Sen, Nishant, Kumar Kanishk, Supratim, Random Skull, McLovin, Jai Hind, Nabanita Das, Bai, Nutan Roshan, Geopolitical Dubai from Indore, good evening, and everybody else. Okay, so let's take some questions. Truthful Penguin, hello. Salvatore's brother Damon is here. Okay, vampires, let's go. Let's take some questions. Oopsie, where is the question? Okay, Mahesh Reshto asks, how could Iran move its nuclear materials without the US picking up on it, considering the strong intelligence resources they have? So we have evidence of Maxar satellite images that show that Iran had these convoys of trucks that were taking materials and stuff and equipment, possibly, whatever. They were taking these materials away from those nuclear sites that were bombed by the US, by the B-2 bombers using bunker buster bombs. So we have satellite images that show that this happened, like a couple of days before the bombing happened. So it's like the Iranians knew about this, right? And Mr. Trump had been foreshadowing his attack on Iran for at least a couple of weeks before it happened. And we have no evidence that this may or may not have happened, but it's possible that there could have been some communication, that something's coming up. So if Iran was able to move its materials out of the nuclear sites, it's not like the US did not pick up on it. The US has eyes in the sky everywhere. The US knows everything that happens in real time. So they knew it. And they waited for the materials to be taken away, and then they bombed those three sites, Fordo, Natanz, and so on. So, is it a fixed match? Is it? That's the question. That is the question. Unkar says, how can India ever achieve the denuclearization of Pakistan? Well, you see, my friends, most likely Pakistan doesn't have its own indigenous nuclear weapons. Most likely Pakistan has American nuclear weapons. Just like the US has parked a bunch of nuclear warheads in Turkey, a bunch in the Netherlands, some in some other countries, and so on. Similarly, the US seems to have parked a bunch of nuclear warheads in Pakistan. The objective most likely is to counterbalance India, right? So that is the US approach towards India. Please understand that, right? So if India is to denuclearize Pakistan, India would have, we kind of, to some extent, apparently, partially denuclearize Pakistan with our strike on the Noor Khan Air Base. So it has now emerged that the Noor Khan Air Base is operated by the US. And Pakistani military personnel are not allowed inside. Okay? And apparently, there could have been some sensitive materials in the Nur Khan Air Base. And our strikes on the Nur Khan Air Base have created problems there. Um, so, so the point is that the Pakistani nuclear arsenal is actually most likely the American. It's an American loan to Pakistan. So to denuclearize Pakistan, we would have to somehow convince the US to withdraw its nuclear weapons from Pakistan. How to do that is a different story. um, okay, this is a good question by Pranay. What do you think was Israel's core objective in this conflict? Denuclearization of Iran or something more? And has that objective been achieved? So first of all, bottom line up top, Israel's objectives have not been achieved. Okay? So what was the objective? Well, the objective was Mr. Netanyahu's great objectives. First, denuclearization of Iran. Second, comprehensive military defeat of Iran. Third, regime change in Tehran. Those were the objectives of Mr. Netanyahu. Has Iran been denuclearized? It has not been denuclearized. The US ensured that the Iranians were able to take out all the whatever materials and equipment, whatever they wanted to take out of Fordo and Natanz and whatnot, those nuclear sites that were hit. It's also very likely that the bunker buster bombs did not destroy the sites entirely. They must have caved in the tunnels, the entrances to the tunnels that lead into the sites. But most likely, according to US intelligence assessments, these strikes have not destroyed the facilities themselves. Iran will be able to eventually excavate and reopen the sites, the entrances to the sites. So the denuclearization has not happened. Iran has not been comprehensively military defeated, right? It's not been a comprehensive military defeat. Iran is claiming victory, that we have emerged victorious. And by not being defeated, you could argue that to some extent, when it comes to facing up against the US and its primary ally in the region, Iran, by surviving and by not being defeated, has kind of achieved some kind of victory. So Iran has not been denuclearized. Iran has not been defeated. There has been no regime change in Iran. So these objectives have not been met. So what has Israel achieved? Israel has assassinated some 30-40 top-ranking Iranian IRGC leaders, military personnel, and nuclear scientists, and so on. But Iran endures. So what else has Israel achieved? Well, apart from that, they have bombed some facilities and so on, but no major achievement. No major achievement. Iran still exists. Iran endures. Iran's nuclear program isn't destroyed. Iran's government is still very much in power. The people of the country have kind of rallied around the government because of the external threat and so on. So overall, it's not been a victory for Israel. Israel has not achieved its core objectives. Israel has been thwarted. Mr. Netanyahu has been thwarted. Mr. Netanyahu, I don't know what he will do now, because he faces personal problems. He faces political troubles. He faces corruption charges. A corruption trial is ongoing. And if for Mr. Netanyahu to get salvation and freedom from this, he would have had to achieve a comprehensive victory over Iran. The kind of victory that no other Israeli leader has achieved in the past. And that has clearly not happened. So what happens now? Mr. Netanyahu will most likely double down on the Gaza war, possibly. So yeah, the objectives have not been achieved. Nimish says, earlier today, NATO chief called Donald Trump daddy live on camera. Really? Let me quickly fact check that if it's possible. I'm astonished if that's true. NATO chief calls Trump daddy? Really? NATO chief calls Trump daddy for using the F word in a bizarre compliment. I have no idea what this means. Okay, this I think is a part of Western culture I don't understand. Okay, I don't get it. So I will. What are my thoughts? My thoughts are that I have no idea what this is. I have no idea what it means. Bizarre. Okay, Hitanshu says, Safran Aircraft Engines has announced the construction of a new MRO shop dedicated to the Rafale's M88 engine in Hyderabad. What are my views on further indigenous development of future aircraft? They have announced the construction of a shop dedicated to the engine of the Rafale. It's a factory which will, I suppose, build the engines, the M88 engines. Well, I think that's a welcome move, and we should indigenize at least have it produced locally, even if it's produced by a French technology and so on. Even if the technology is not transferred to us, it's a step in the right direction. That's what I would say. This is not connected to the further indigenous development of future aircraft. Jet engines are a specific niche in a critical niche in fighter aircraft development. But see, how does aircraft development happen? You assume that you're going to have an engine that gives you a certain amount of thrust and certain amount of performance characteristics. You assume that, and based on that, you develop the aircraft around it. You generally develop an aircraft around an existing engine. So let's say you have the Rafale M88 engine, so you develop an aircraft around it. So you design and build an aircraft according to these performance characteristics of the engine, or maybe the General Electric F404 or F414, whatever you want to take it, or maybe the future Kaveri engine, right? So this doesn't really have an impact on future indigenous development of future aircraft. This is a good move when it comes to building engines in India. So I welcome this, definitely, very much so. Okay. Samarth Acharya says, dumb question. No, it's not a dumb question. How are nuclear arsenals maintained? Well, that's not something we are supposed to know. Okay. So what's a nuclear arsenal? It's a collection of nuclear weapons, nuclear warheads. A nuclear warhead is, well, it's an engineering, it's a mechanical device. And it has various components depending on what kind of warhead it is, whether it's a fission device, whether it's a thermonuclear device, fission fusion device, three-stage device. The initial trigger is a chemical reaction, a chemical explosion, chemical explosives, yes, and so on. So based on the various characteristics of the nuclear weapons, you may need to open them up for inspection and check the various things and so on. I assume, because I have absolutely no idea, no understanding, because these things are super secret. These things are super secret. How do you maintain your nuclear weapons? Do you inspect them regularly? Do you subject them to some kind of tests? Do you open them up and maybe replace some components once in a while, at a certain frequency, maybe every year or maybe every 2 years or whatever, if required? I'm not sure how it's done. I suppose some maintenance is done on a recurring basis, maybe monthly, yearly, by twice, once in 2 years or whatever. I think it's similar to the kind of maintenance that would typically be done with your missiles. I mean, if you have a stockpile of 10,000 missiles, you're gonna have to maintain them from time to time. Obviously, we now have solid fueled rockets, which are easier to maintain. Liquid fuel rockets, they have to be fueled before they are launched. So that's a much more cumbersome and complicated challenge. So I suppose, so when it comes to your missile arsenal, you test missiles once or twice a year. Randomly you pick some missiles, a couple of missiles, and you test them. That gives you an indicator of how well the missiles are performing and how well they are lasting, and what is the effect of time on them. Sometimes you'll find that a missile will fizzle out. Sometimes you may find that. So similarly, some such maintenance will be done on nuclear weapons, but the exact specifics and details are highly classified and secret. Okay. Shah Raj says, China, Pakistan, America are allies in common issues, I believe. Well, they're allies when it comes to India, because the US and China see eye to eye when it comes to India. Neither nation wants India to grow too much, to rise too much, right? That is a common point of understanding when it comes to the US and China. But how to approach India, there is a difference in that. So both nations are investing in Pakistan. It's something we can discuss, in detail in a future geostrategy perhaps episode, as to is there no conflict of interest when it comes to China and the US in their relationship with Pakistan, because the US has most likely deployed nuclear weapons in Pakistan. The US has sold F-16s to Pakistan. The US has significant investments in Pakistan of various kinds. The US operates the Noor Khan Air Base, right? So there is a significant US presence in Pakistan. But on the other hand, the Chinese are selling fighter planes to Pakistan, maybe the J-35. If they sell the J-35, will the US not get their hands on the J-35? Will that not be a problem for China, and so on? So there are issues, very interesting issues there, that we could potentially discuss in a future geostrategy episode or Indian interest episode. But overall, yes, when it comes to India, China and the US see eye to eye, and Pakistan is their common asset, the common vassal. More of a US vassal, less of a Chinese vassal, but in the past it's been a full-fledged Chinese vassal, Pakistan, and so on. Malik Sayed says, Colonel Douglas MacGregor, a former advisor to Trump, says that Israel most likely underestimated the Iranian missile capabilities, and they had to forcefully de-escalate, or they would have collapsed internally. What are my thoughts? Okay, I'm not aware of what he has said, but thinking about this logically, it makes a bit of sense, actually. It is very likely that Iran has significant reserves, a significant stockpile of various kinds of missiles. They have been very acutely aware of the fact that they have been encircled by US bases, right, to a large extent, and they are aware that most of the nations in the region are pro-US. They're also aware of the fact that Israel sees Iran, for good reasons, as a major threat, right? So Iran has been for a long time aware of the threat, uh, of the threat scenario it faces, and that's why it has been stockpiling missiles of various kinds, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, lots and lots of drones. It's also been exporting drones to Russia for use in the Ukraine conflict and so on. So it is very likely that Iran has a tremendous stockpile of missiles and drones, and it most likely significantly outnumbers the number of Iron Dome missiles the Israelis have for their protection. So it just becomes a numerical certainty that after a certain time, all Iranian missiles will hit hit Israel, because their Iron Dome missiles will be depleted, right? Uh, so it is perhaps possible that Israel may have underestimated Iran's missile capabilities, and that's why they may have chosen to de-escalate. Otherwise, their military objectives have not been achieved. Netanyahu wanted denuclearization of Iran, hasn't happened. He wanted regime change in Iran, hasn't happened. He wanted a complete, comprehensive military defeat of Iran, hasn't happened. None of that has happened, but he had to de-escalate. So there are multiple factors that must have gone into the de-escalation. Trump also is a big factor. He looks like he wanted this to end without an Israeli victory. Looks like he was okay with Iran, pulling out its nuclear materials from the sites that he struck at, and so on. So yeah, it's complicated. But overall, I would agree that Israel would have been in deep trouble if this conflict had continued, and Iran would have been forced to push it further. I'm not sure if they would have collapsed internally. They would have possibly come close to collapsing, but then they always have the Samson option, which is something nobody wants to countenance. Okay. Let's see. What other questions do we have? Geopolitical Dubey says, what makes gravity invisible to our eyes? What is stronger, time or gravity? Okay. Well, when it comes to gravity, well, if you look at it, we can look at it from various perspectives. If you look at the Newtonian perspective on gravity, according to the Newtonian perspective, gravity is an action at a distance kind of force. It acts at a distance, it acts instantaneously. But that's not the case, because Einstein's theory of general relativity shows that there's an inbuilt speed limit in gravity, which is the speed of light. And if you study general relativity, it tells you that gravity is not a force, it is something that results from the curvature of space-time. So the curvature so space-time is a four-dimensional fabric, which includes the dimension of time. Okay, so time is part of the fabric of space-time. It's the fourth dimension, and the presence of mass causes space-time to curve. Mass curves space-time, and the curvature of space-time tells mass how to move. That is general relativity, and it's a supremely well-tested theory. People have been trying to break it through experimental tests for decades. Never happened. It's extremely well tested. So general relativity is the best theory that we have, and it's a very precise, very accurate theory. GPS won't work without general relativity. So according to general relativity, time is a dimension. It's one of the four dimensions. And gravity, the force, what we feel is the force of gravity, it is simply caused by the curvature of space-time, which we perceive as a force, but it's not really a force. Okay? So that is the deal. Now, obviously, the gravity which we feel as a force does have a strength, and it's extremely, extremely strong, weak. It's the weakest of the forces. And there's also the possibility that the gravity could be quantum mechanical in nature, which to prove that you have to quantize general relativity, and that's not working out for us, right? So the point is that time doesn't have a strength. Time is a dimension. Just like length or breadth doesn't have a strength, that way time doesn't have a strength. Okay, so you can't compare the strengths of time versus something else. Time is just a dimension. What makes gravity invisible to the eyes? Well, gravity is the curvature of this four-dimensional fabric of space-time. And we cannot perceive four dimensions. We only perceive three dimensions, right? We do perceive electromagnetic quanta, which are photons. That is how we see the universe. You can see different colors over here. You can see greenish blue over here. You can see yellow over here, another yellow here, reddish magenta stuff here, and so on. Over here, it's more red. Over here, it's blue, and so on. So these are photons of different frequencies or wavelengths that we are perceiving in real time. When it comes to gravity, if gravity has a quantum mechanical nature, the fundamental particle may be the graviton, but we don't perceive it. We are electromagnetic creatures. We are not gravitational creatures. We do feel gravity weakly, but our sense organs are geared towards the electromagnetic spectrum, not the gravitational spectrum. And that's why gravity is invisible to our eyes. In case we have dark matter creatures somewhere, maybe there are dark matter scientists who are observing us right now and we're not aware of them. Well, if there are beings made of dark matter only, then their eyes would be gravitational in nature, and they would see the universe in a whole different set of frequencies and wavelengths. They would see the gravitational nature of the universe, not the electromagnetic nature of the universe. So, yeah, I hope that answers the question. Sri Ramachandraya Namaha says, why is the interior of the earth moving? What if it stops moving? It's a great question. These are the kind of questions we should be allowed to ask. These are the kind of questions children should be allowed to ask their teachers in school, because that's how you understand the world. So why is the interior of the earth moving? It's because, so it all goes back to the beginning of the solar system. How did the solar system form? The solar system formed out of a gigantic cloud of gas and dust. This cloud of gas and dust was formed by the death of a previous star, which probably went supernova, boom. And it just spilled its guts out. And this gave rise to this gigantic nebula, this huge cloud of gas and dust. And after hundreds of millions of years, this cloud of gas and dust again coalesced together because of self-gravitation, and it formed what we call a protostellar disk. What does a protostellar disk look like? Let's find out together. Protostellar disk. Protostellar disk. Okay, you can also call it a protoplanetary disk. So this is what it looks like. So eventually, because of the action of its own gravity, self-gravitation, the the cloud coalesces into a disk, and it develops a chunkier, a more massive center, and the rest of the cloud starts revolving around the center. And over time, because of self-gravitation, the central component of the cloud, it accumulates enough gas, mainly hydrogen, for nuclear fusion to ignite. And that is the birth of a new star. And then over time, various other parts of the cloud start coalescing together in the form of planets, and that's what happened in the early solar system. So initially the earth was formed about 4.5 or so billion years ago as a gigantically hot ball of magma, just molten rock. Okay, it was hugely hot, so hot that rock would melt, and slowly it cooled, slowly. So the cooling happened on the surface. So it developed a crust, an outer crust, which solidified over time. But the interior retained the original heat of the early solar system, and the interior is still molten. And at the core, because of pressure, there is a solid core of iron and nickel. So because of the molten internal structure of the planet, and because of the angular momentum it inherited from the beginning of the solar system, it's still moving inside. That's why the interior of the earth is moving. I hope it makes sense what I've explained. What if it stops moving? Well, if it stops moving, earth becomes like Mars. So Mars is a much smaller planet than us, than the earth, and its interior has most likely more or less stopped moving because it has cooled down and is mostly solidified. What does that do? What effect did it have on Mars? The effect it had on Mars was that Mars lost its magnetic field. See, moving charges cause magnetic fields, and ions inside the moving interior of the earth in the magma layer, they cause this gigantically powerful magnetic field that the earth has. Because of the magnetic field, most of the cosmic rays and much of the solar wind is trapped by the magnetic field. It doesn't reach us, otherwise it will kill us or cause cancer, right? And that's why we have been able to evolve as a species. So if the interior of the earth stops moving, our magnetic field dies and we are exposed to horrific cosmic rays, cosmic radiation, solar radiation. It will kill us off. That's what happens. Okay. Akshit says NATO countries have together decided to raise their military budget from 2% to 5% by 2035. What are their long-term and short-term ambitions and future goals? You see, the NATO nations were very happy to have military budgets that were less than 2% of their GDP. Because of that, these nations were able to become essentially welfare states, and they were able to become super prosperous and so on. Very great standards of living and so on, and very lazy, compared to the US, very lazy lifestyles. If you go to Italy, people in the afternoon go to sleep for an hour or two. It's called the siesta. And you don't work beyond 5, and you don't work, you don't do extra shifts and whatnot. People have a very relaxed lifestyle in Europe. It's because the government was able to spend so much more because of its tiny military budgets. Because the US historically footed most of the military budget of NATO. And now Mr. Trump has decided that this will not happen anymore. And he has said that NATO nations must raise their military budgets from below 2% to 5%. And Mr. Trump has made them agree. The US is all powerful. So that's why the NATO nations have decided to agree to what Mr. Trump has demanded, and they are going to raise their military budget gradually to 5% by 2035 or so. So the long-term ambition is that NATO nations must become self-sufficient in their military department, and the specter that is given is the specter of a future Russian invasion of Europe, right? So I don't think Russia has any such ambitions, but okay, if it makes you do it, do it. So overall, it's the US that wants to reduce its spending on NATO. It wants the NATO nations to foot more of the bill that it was footing earlier. So that's why it has happened. And long term, as a long term reason for this, the Russian threat is cited. Okay. Sumit says, wow, how would you rank the Sukhoi 57's performance in the Russia-Ukraine war? Many people around the world have questioned its ability as a stealth capability. How would you rank the best fighter jets in the world? I would rank the F-22 as the world's best fighter jet. After that, I'm not sure, but the F-22 is brilliant, and that's why the US doesn't export it to anybody, not even to its closest vassals, right? The Sukhoi 57's performance in the Russia-Ukraine war, I'm not sure how it's performed. Has it performed at all? I mean, has it been deployed at all? Maybe briefly, but it doesn't look like it's been deployed a lot. So I can't really, form an opinion based on the little that I know. Uh, Now, a lot of people have questioned the Sukhoi 57's stealth capabilities and all that. Many of those would be from the West because they want to sell their own planes, their own fighter aircraft to other countries. But it may be that it does have some deficiencies when it comes to its stealth profile, which is okay. Which is okay. Look, when it comes to India and making a decision as to which aircraft to buy in the interim until we develop our own AMCA, when it comes to that question, we need to be practical and pragmatic. We don't want to spend $100 million plus per piece. Okay, we can't afford to spend that much. And secondly, we can't afford to have an aircraft that has inbuilt loopholes, inbuilt uh, inbuilt backdoors, and kill switches. That's the F-35. We can't afford to have that. That will compromise us no end. And thirdly, the fighter plane you purchase doesn't have to be the best in the world. It has to be decent. As long as it has fifth generation capabilities, which the Sukhoi 57 has, I think we should consider it seriously. Even if it doesn't have a super stealthy profile, it's okay. Right? Because at the end of the day, quantity has a quality of its own. Get 100, 200 of these and, it'll be a game changer. So that's how I would see this. Amisha says, is the moon slowly moving away from the Earth? Is this true? It is true. It's moving away fractionally from the Earth. So, in the past, let's say when the Earth was 1 billion years old or so, the moon was much, much closer to the Earth, and the Earth's rotation period was also much faster. So the Earth day was about 10 hours or so. One day on our planet was 10 hours only. Now it's 24 hours, right? Roughly 24 hours. In the past, it was about 10 hours, and the moon was much closer to the Earth. And the moon has been slowly, gradually, maybe a centimeter or so per year, around that kind of figure, it's moving away from Earth because of gravitational dynamics. And the moon is tidally locked with the planet, with our Earth. But in maybe 100 million years, the moon will have receded sufficiently from the Earth for solar eclipses to never be full in the future. So right now we sometimes have complete solar eclipses, right? Where the sun is completely blocked out by the moon. In the future, it won't be full or complete solar eclipses. They'll only be partial solar eclipses, and you will have annular solar eclipses, which means that the sun is not fully blocked by the moon, and there's a ring around the moon when the moon moves away sufficiently. So in about 100 million years, the moon will be sufficiently far away for solar eclipses to no longer be complete solar eclipses. So it is moving away from the Earth for sure. And the rotation period of the Earth is also slowing down correspondingly. So in the future, the Earth will have a 25-hour day and more in the future. What else do we have? Okay, Shaswat Venkat says, what's your opinion on India's neutral stand in this whole Iran-Israel conflict? I completely agree with India's neutral stand in this conflict. This is not our war. There is no reason whatsoever for India to take sides in this war. Look, we have an excellent relationship with Israel. No question. We have significant technological cooperation. We have significant defense cooperation. We manufacture Israeli drones in India, the Harop drone, which was used to strike Pakistani terrorist infrastructure in May. That Harop drone is built in India by Adani, right? It's an Israeli designed drone. So we have a lot of cooperation between India and Israel. A very good working relationship. We have some issues also, but overall it's a very positive and excellent relationship. On the other hand, when it comes to Iran, We also have a reasonably good relationship. We have no significant uh, areas of divergence. Once in a while, some Iranian politician will make statements about Kashmir, which is annoying, but it's only verbal statements. Iran doesn't actually take any real actions that would be detrimental to India's interests. Right? Iran does not have a friendly relationship with Pakistan because Pakistan is a US vassal, and there's also the Sunni Shia issue and so on. So that is good for us, right? Because Pakistan is a terrorist nation, our number one or number two enemy, and not because of us, because of them. They seek to destroy us, right? So, and in the past, we've had energy cooperation much more with Iran. So, we and Iran has given us access to the Chabahar port, through which we can access Afghanistan and Central Asia as well. So, overall, it's a good relationship that we have with Iran. And the US has tried its best to vitiate the relationship. They have pressurized India to stop buying oil from Iran, which has put Iran under pressure, and they've had to seek out other partners like China, etc. Right? So overall, we have good relations with Israel as well as Iran, and it makes sense for us to not divert, not move away from a neutral stance in this matter. And we have exhorted both nations to settle their differences on the negotiating table and don't fight, don't use military means. That's what our stand has been, and I completely agree with this stand. Okay. Okay, let's see some other questions. Okay, I have to hunt for good questions now. Okay, let's take this one. Mind Your Own Business says, why talk about China or US using Bangladesh as a vassal? Why not India making Bangladesh a vassal? Or why doesn't Bangladesh offer itself to India like it did to China? Well, you see, when you grow up, you realize it's not that easy and that simple. Okay? We can talk all we want. We can talk all we want, but the real world, it doesn't operate on the basis of verbal talk. It operates on the basis of ground realities. And the basic ground reality is hard power. Okay? So yeah, we can say, why not India making Bangladesh a vassal? But what if there are way more powerful nations which will not allow this to happen? Right? You have to understand a bit of nuance and complexity. If you just do surface level analysis your whole life, you will never understand anything, and you will keep asking these questions. Why talk like this? Why not talk like that? Hum ye kar lenge, Jai Hind. The world doesn't work like that. You may be as patriotic as we want, but you have to acknowledge the ground realities of the world. What are the ground realities? Bangladesh was cooperating with India for about 20 years, for more than 10 years, as long as Sheikh Hasina was prime minister. Bangladesh was not an Indian vassal, but it was not a Chinese vassal and not a US vassal. Bangladesh was very cooperative with India. And that was a great victory for our foreign policy. Then what the US did? See, now, you'll ask yourself, how can the US do something in Bangladesh? The US is so far away. Ask yourself this question. If the US is so far away and China is so powerful, why can't it take Taiwan? It's because the US is so powerful that even in China's own backyard, China can't take an island. That's how powerful the US is. So what the US did in Bangladesh is that they effected a regime change operation. And they got rid of Sheikh Hasina and implanted a puppet government, the Mohammed Yunus regime, which is actually a military government. Okay, the military is running the country. Mohammed Yunus is just the puppet, the show, the face for show. And when the US makes a nation a vassal, India has to stay out of it, otherwise there'll be tremendous repercussions that you can't imagine. So, and obviously, the US must have given a lot of very sweet inducements to the Bangladesh military, to Mohammed Yunus, etc. The kind of inducements India can't afford to give because we don't have deep enough pockets like the US has. All right, so please understand these are some of the ground realities. The world doesn't work on the basis of slogans. We can say whatever we want, but what we do is always commensurate with our hard power, and it's always in measured against the hard power of our adversaries. And that's how it works. All right. Mahi Shrestha says, does a leader seek to lead, or is he called to it? Well, sometimes leaders seek to lead because they know they have this leadership potential, capabilities, or whatever. And sometimes leaders are called to lead even though they don't want to lead. I mean, since we have been discussing Iran, Israel, I mean, let's talk about Iran and the current supreme leader of Iran, Mr. Khamenei. So, Mr. Khamenei came to power after Ayatollah Khomeini died. I don't remember which year it was. Sometime in the 1990s, was it? Let me see. Let's quickly find out. Khomeini. So he passed away in 1989, and that is when Mr. Ali Khamenei became the supreme leader of Iran. Now, Mr. Ali Khamenei did not want to be the supreme leader of Iran. He strongly, essentially protested. I don't want to be the guy. I'm not the right guy for you, and so on. But the Iranian Majlis, or whatever it's called, they decided you're going to be the guy. And he has been the supreme leader ever since. Sometimes you don't want it, but you're called to it. But in some cases, you want it, you seek it, and you gain it. For example, Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump decided he wanted to become the president. And he put his own money into the campaign, and he succeeded twice. So here you have a leader who has sought the supreme position. He has sought to lead. On the other hand, if you look at Iran, Mr. Khamenei never wanted to lead, but here he is as a supreme leader. So two examples which kind of illustrate the point. Okay. Okay, Krishna Nayak says, do you think the Gulf Cooperation Council countries are really standing with Iran, or are they secretly happy that Israel attacked Iran? When it comes to the Gulf nations, the Arab nations, okay, let's take a look at the map, which will help us understand the region a little better. So look at the Gulf region, West Asia. So what we have here is Iran in the east, and then we have all the Arab nations: Oman, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, Syria, Jordan, and Egypt is also an Arab nation, right? So that's the situation. So you have Iran, which is a non-Arab nation. It's an Aryan nation, essentially. It's an extension of the Indian subcontinent. And you have all these other nations, Arabic nations. And the GCC nations are mainly the Arab nations. Iran is a Shia nation. All the GCC, other nations in the GCC are Sunni nations. And Iran is a nation that has historically ambitions of its own, geopolitical ambitions and so on. And the Arab nations kind of fear Iran, right? And there is rivalry between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and also Turkey to some extent for the leadership of the Islamic world, and so on. It's complicated, multiple levels to this thing. So, and recently in 2020, you had the signing of the Abraham Accords. I think it was in 2020. Mr. Trump presided over that, and that brought forth some kind of normalization relations between Israel and some of these Arab nations. And what the Arab nations want, for example, what the UAE wants and desires, is stability in the region. They don't want warfare. What Saudi Arabia also wants is stability in the region. They don't want warfare. They don't want destabilized neighborhood. They want a stable neighborhood so that they can work towards development. They want economic development. They want to develop their nations further. They understand that oil is no longer going to be forever the commodity that the world prizes over everything else. You're going to have changes in technology. You're going to have the advent of the electric vehicle era, lithium era, and so on. So you can't keep depending on oil forever. So they're trying to diversify their economies and so on, and they want to develop the region further. So they don't want warfare. So I'm sure many of these nations are not happy that Israel attacked Iran, because that destabilizes the neighborhood. And I'm not sure they all stand with Iran. They neither stand with Iran nor are they happy that the Israeli attack caused the destabilization of the region. I mean, flights were diverted. I have people asking me, is it safe to go to the UK today, and so on, right? So, so these nations are not secretly happy about what has happened, and they don't even stand with Iran. They actually want to be left alone. They want to be left alone to develop their economies further, and so on. So that's the deal. Uh, Sushant says, as per Chavda Index 2024, USA's hard power score is 93.32. India has 4.91. What weapon technologies does the US have that India lacks? Is it just better quantity? What American missile slash technology do we have no answer to? The US overall is a superpower in every sense. We have excellent missiles, but as far as I know, we haven't announced intercontinental capabilities of the Agni 5 or something beyond that. So that's one capability we kind of lack. I think the longest range stated ranged or announced range is about 8,000 kilometers or so of the Agni 5. Maybe we are understating the range of the Agni 5, just not to so as to not to offend or alarm nations like the US, right? But maybe that's one thing we lack. Okay, one example of a thing we lack. Otherwise, our missiles are supremely good. We have some of the best missiles in the world. When it comes to aircraft, the US has far better aircraft. The US has strategic bombers. We lack that, right? The US has all kinds of whole families of fighter planes. We lack that. The US has this heavy, massively heavy transport aircraft. We lack that. The US has extraordinarily good nuclear submarines. We don't have that, and so on and so forth. I could go on forever. So the US is far ahead of India, way ahead of India. Okay, so it's quantity as well as quality. It's way ahead in both considerations. Okay, for India to increase its hard power score, first of all, we need to reduce. So right now, one of the factors that affects our hard power score and brings it down is our um, is the fact that we are not self-sufficient in energy. We have to import about 59% of our energy, as far as I remember, or maybe the other way around, whatever. But about half or more of our energy has to be imported. That is a critical problem for India. It's an Achilles heel for India. We have to find our own energy resources somehow or the other. If we can do that, that will bring our hard power score higher. Uh, Another factor that brings our hard power score down is that we allegedly officially have only about 150 or 160 nuclear warheads. The Americans have thousands, right? So that's a huge factor that brings our hard power score down. Another factor that brings our hard power score down is our lack of power projection capabilities. The Americans have tremendous power projection capabilities. We have very limited power projection capabilities. So all of these factors put together, and then there's the economic factor. There's the GDP factor. The US GDP is way ahead of India. That's a huge factor that brings our hard power score down. Our limited military budget also brings our hard power score down, and so on and so forth. So that's why our hard power score is 4.91, and the US is 93, almost 94, right? Okay, let's take some more questions. Rishabh Shukla says updates on ISRO's Gaganyaan mission and other missions such as developing reusable rockets. I'll have to speak to somebody from ISRO. I'm not sure about what's the deal with the Gaganyaan mission. We were actually supposed to do the first launches last year, but I think there were delays because of COVID and so on. There may be delays because of technical issues. I'm not sure. As far as I know, we're supposed to do at least the first launch, unmanned launch this year with the heaviest rocket, the most powerful rocket that we have, the LMB, whatever. It used to be called the GSLV in the past. So as far as I know, there's supposed to be a launch this year, but I'm not sure what the status is on that. Reusable rockets, I have absolutely no idea. I would be thrilled if ISRO were to be developing reusable rockets. I want nothing more than that. I mean, there's nothing more that I want than ISRO developing reusable rockets. But are we doing that? If yes, what is the status? I am not quite sure. So yeah, I'm not quite sure what the deal is, what's happening, what the status is. Okay, Dheeraj Kamath says if Israel is not a US vassal, then is the entirety of the West an Israeli vassal? Sounds a bit far-fetched. They are basically the sole superpower then. Why didn't the US help Israel during the Six-Day War? Well, it's a historical conflict. That's an old issue. The question is, you had a 12-day war just now. Mr. Trump has formally declared that this war will be called the 12-day war. So it's now to be called the 12-day war. So we had a 12-day war just now, and the US did not really help Israel achieve a complete victory. The US did not help Mr. Netanyahu achieve his heart's desire, which was the denuclearization of Iran, a military defeat of Iran, and a regime change in Tehran. None of this happened. So Mr. Netanyahu has not achieved what he wanted. But does it mean Israel has not achieved what he wanted? Maybe Israel is fine, but Mr. Netanyahu isn't happy. Now the question is whose vassal, right? The US generally has vassals all over the world. Pakistan, East and West Pakistan are examples. Japan is occupied vassal. South Korea is occupied vassal. Germany and Italy are occupied vassals. Various other NATO nations are non-occupied vassals, but vassals by the fact that they are part of NATO. EU nations are vassals, and so on and so forth. The question is Israel. What is the status of Israel? Is Israel a US vassal state? Well, it doesn't look like Israel is a US vassal state, because the US doesn't extract a pound of flesh from Israel like it does from every other nation. On the other hand, the US does give a few pounds of flesh to Israel whenever Israel needs that. So then the question is the US an Israeli vassal? That's what some people claim. Well, I think I will reserve my judgment until I find more information. Okay. All right. What else? Okay, let us take this one. Anonymous scientist says, can India purchase POK from Pakistan by giving some money? Would that be acceptable to Indians? And would Pakistan accept that offer? You know what? If the Indian government offers a certain amount of money to Pakistan and Pakistan accepts that offer, I'll be fine with that. I'll be okay with it. Fine. I'm sure many Indians will be okay with it. But many Indians may also say that why buy it with money? It's our territory. Yeah, and maybe that's a good argument, perhaps, right? But if you can do a one-time payment and get rid of the problem, maybe it's worth it. So maybe there are two sides of the coin, but the real question is, would Pakistan accept that offer? And the answer is no. Because Pakistan has masters who have deeper pockets. And Pakistan has masters who need Pakistan to retain that territory. These masters, essentially it's the US and to some extent China, mainly the US, they have always sought to use Pakistan as a factor that destabilizes India. It's counterbalance to India. The US funded and financed Pakistani terrorism against India for decades. It's a well-known fact, right? So Pakistan is very valuable. And POK is also valuable. Why give away an inch of territory to the nation you want to destabilize? So it won't happen. And Pakistan, even if it won't be allowed to accept such an offer. Let us see. What else do we have? Okay, now science dates the Earth at 4.54 billion years. Hinduism says Brahma's day is 4.32 billion years. I'm not sure what Hinduism says. Okay, there are various interpretations of what one lifetime of Brahma is and one day of Brahma is. So for example, if you look at the worst website of all time, which is Wikipedia, let's just briefly take a look at that, just for illustrative purposes. Never rely on Wikipedia information, but I'm just taking a look at it. Okay, so Hindu cosmology, Wikipedia. Okay, Hindu cosmology. So what does Wikipedia have to say about this? Yeah, Hindu cosmology and tremendous huge numbers and stuff. Do we have something? Oops, it's gone. What do we have? Lokas, multiple universes, Brahmanda. Brahma, the cosmic egg. Okay, I'm not sure which article it was. I had seen in the past some article in which you had these timelines. Call Hindu units of time. Let's take a look at this. Maybe this. Okay, so you have various units, sidereal units, Surya Siddhanta, small units of time used in the Vedas, cosmic metrics, Mahakalpa, which is 100 years of Brahma. So Kalpa is what? 12 hours of Brahma, which is 4.3 billion years for humans. Okay, according to Wikipedia, I think that's what you found from Wikipedia. So according to Wikipedia, one Kalpa apparently is equivalent to 12 hours of Brahma's lifetime, and that's 4.3 billion years. So one full day of Brahma's lifetime, according to this information here, would be 8.6 billion years. I'm not sure if it's a precise match or whatever. I don't know. And I'm not sure what it hints or what it doesn't hint. So, yeah, I'm not the guy to ask these questions. Okay, I'm not an expert by any means on sadly our scriptures and all. And yeah. Okay. Amisha says Trump has now become a meme. He has lost credibility. Well, kind of. Well, he's a funny guy. Nobody can speak the way Mr. Trump can speak, right? He has his own way of speaking. It's very hard to imitate that. And he even writes the way he tweets, the way he speaks. He tweets the way he speaks. So he's kind of a meme. He has a penchant for making very meme-worthy statements and remarks. I mean, he did that in the wake of the violation of the ceasefire between Israel and Iran. Right? He was very upset and so on. But has he lost credibility? I'm not sure if he has lost credibility. He seems to have actually, for a change, enforced a ceasefire. When it comes to India, Pakistan, he claimed to have mediated, but it was not true. But when it comes to Israel, Iran, it looks like he has actually actively participated from day one, and he has put an end to the fighting. And if he can pull off a Nobel Peace Prize, it will bring him way more credibility. So I think it's somewhere in between. Yes, people don't take Trump as seriously as they would take other past US presidents, partly because of Mr. Trump's personality and all. But Trump does mean business. And if he makes a threat, people take it very seriously. I promise you that. If he makes a threat against India, we have to take it seriously. It's clear that he made Mr. Netanyahu agree to a ceasefire. I'm not sure how he pursued Mr. Netanyahu, but he did pursue it, Mr. Netanyahu. And it looks like Mr. Netanyahu was not happy with it. So Trump, when he wants to get certain things done, he does get those things done. So that would actually mean that you have to take him seriously, which means that he still has credibility. Of course, there is reason to what you say, but I would say that he has not entirely lost credibility. Okay. Let's take a couple more questions, maybe. Savaria says maybe the US doesn't want to denuclearize Iran to sell weapons to the Middle East. It is already selling weapons to the Middle East. They recently concluded a ginormous deal with Saudi Arabia, more than $100 billion. I'm not sure what it was. A huge deal with Saudi Arabia. Let's quickly take a look at what was the kind of deal they did with Saudi Arabia. Huge weapons deal. So they don't need the war to go on for that. US Saudi weapons deal Trump. Okay, not 2017, bruh. Okay, $142 billion sale. That's a gigantic deal. And Saudi Arabia, this agreement with Saudi Arabia includes investments in weapons and technology totaling $600 billion. And the outright sale is $142 billion. That's a gigantic sale for Donald Trump and for the US. So Saudi Arabia is anyway, the Middle East countries are anyway buying US weapons in large quantities, keeping Mr. Trump happy and so on. So that is already there. And this happened before the Israel-Iran war, before Israel attacked Iran. So I think what the US wants is to maintain the current balance of power in the region. They don't want to create a vacuum where Iran exists today, as of now. That's what it looks like. And let us take maybe one more question. Okay, let's see. Yash says, does India have the potential to become a major defense exporter in the world? It does. India does have the potential for that. India does very much of that. We have the recent Operation Sindoor showed us how powerful, how accurate, how excellent our indigenously designed and developed and manufactured weapons systems are. Yeah. Krishna Raghunath says, if the partition of India had never happened, this is the final question for the day, by the way. If the partition of India had never happened, would India be in a better or worse state than the current political situations that India has with Pakistan and Bangladesh? Well, it could have been better, could have been worse. On the one hand, you would have a very mixed population in India, a significantly higher Muslim population in India, and allegedly Muslims can't stay with Hindus. That's the two-nation theory put forth by Jinnah and his buddies, right? So it would all have depended on the leadership that India would have had in this hypothetical scenario. If India in a hypothetical scenario was never partitioned but had weak leadership, then it would have caused chaos, maybe religious strife, ongoing religious strife, terrible religious strife. But if India had a strong leadership, maybe somebody like Subhash Chandra Bose ruling for 20 years or more, then he would have ruled with an iron hand and would have never allowed that sort of religious strife to happen, and he would have never allowed extremist and fundamentalist elements to thrive. He would have crushed them all. So it depends, right? So one can put forth various scenarios, just like one does for future forecasting. Okay, with that, we have come to the end of today's session. Thank you so much for the questions, and I'll see you on Friday, Indian Interest, 8 p.m. After that, we're going to have another Ask Abhijit session. So thank you so much for the questions. Keep asking your questions, keep learning, keep being inquisitive, keep raising your standards. And I thank you for your viewership, for the questions, and I'll see you on Friday. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.